Welcome into another episode of the Ots and Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil on this show. John Evans, I don't think it's quite a debut, but it's a debut talking football for our ace student reporter, a real five-star. John jumping on here as Matt's on a bit of leave to help out, kind of break down Oregon, the offense today. I think we'll talk defense, hopefully later in the week. John, kind of big picture thoughts. Like, what's your impression through five games?
Thank you for having me on the show. First off, Erik, very excited to be here and talk some Oregon football with you today. But yeah, I mean, are we talking specifically just the offense? First overall thoughts from the first couple of weeks, or
let's do that. And actually, John, almost before I jump into this, not to hog the ball here, I wanted to hit just some base counting stats, and then we can pitch this over to you and talk about why you think they're being so successful, what impresses you. And then we're going to do a full position by position breakdown. I think that's going to be fun for listeners. So I was just putting this together this morning. Oregon, 7th nationally in scoring offense, 12th in total offense, 9th in yards per play, 1st in red zone conversion rate, 1st in turnover rate, 1st in sacks allowed, and 8th in plays of 40 yards or more. How does that hit you? That sounds like a pretty good offense, doesn't it?
Those are all impressive marks, and they're marks in the things that you want to be succeeding in terms of, being explosive in the offense, but then also being efficient when you need to be in areas like the red zone. I think that's something that Oregon has. I mean, that was an issue at times early last year, and Will Stein talked about this, where because Dillon Gabriel had, he's a veteran quarterback, but he was new to the system. There were times where, he got a little uncomfortable in the red zone, the Michigan State game, the UCLA game, he throws some picks in the low red, but Dante Moore has looked comfortable and has had that, experience in the offense that he was able to gain last year. And it showed up because, he knows how to operate in the red zone. And he's not going to make those. You go back to that first game against Montana State and Dan Lanning talking about one of the early possessions. They had it on like the 10 on like third down, and Dante Moore, instead of early in that game, just scrambles out of bounds for 5 yards. I think that speaks to just the maturity of what, Dante Moore has developed in his year behind Dillon Gabriel, learning this Will Stein system, and that's really applied so far to kind of unlock this offense into one of the best in college football so far.
A couple of things I also wanted to talk about before we dive into some Will Stein and kind of why this is taking place. I was looking at this morning over on PFF. This is the most explosive offense that Will Stein has led if you just look at these kind of metrics. So from an average depth of target perspective, Dante this year, 8.6. That's up from 7.0 with Dillon Gabriel in 24 and 6.8 with Bo Nix in 23. Don't think that's a huge surprise having watched it. Obviously, smaller sample size. Defenses haven't been quite as good aside from Saturday as maybe the totality of the previous schedules, but that's notable. And then this one, yards per carry average. I know that's that's not a real fancy, but that's an interesting stat to look at. 6.1 in 2023, 5.0 last year, and then up to 6.3 this year. So those are just some kind of like base metrics to, I guess, evaluate offensive explosiveness through the pass on the ground. What's working? Like why, from your perspective, are they able to be a little bit more explosive this year, have some more success in both the pass and the run game?
It's a combination of the personnel that they have. They didn't have some of these guys that they do out there in previous years, but it's also that Will Stein system. They still do all the little things. It's still built around, the counter runs and all those, the ground game, and then all the stuff that the RPOs and the screen game and stuff that Dante Moore does in the short game. But when you execute that at a high level, that's what it opens up those deep shots and those plays down the field. Because if you're executing at a high level in the run game, then you can hit those play action fakes and be able to open things up. So it's a combination of the two of those things, but it's Will Stein really getting to execute his offense at the highest level, he has been able to, because he didn't have a quarterback like Dante Moore necessarily before who could hit some of these throws on the move and can improvise in some of these ways that he can. And he didn't have guys like, not to say that Bucky Irving or Jordan James weren't explosive, but they ran where they did in the combine for reasons. But I don't think Dier Hill is going to run in the 4.5s when he is draft eligible in a couple of years. I think he's more of a 4.4, maybe in a high 4.3s guy. So they just have some of those playmakers, guys like Dorian Moore, and who have taken this offense to another level to where, and even the tight end position, Kenyon Sadiq, like he is more explosive than a guy like Terrence Ferguson was. So it's a combination of those things.
Let's focus on Will for a second before we hit the positions. You do a great piece of work on our website every Sunday. A couple times it's been Monday, but just like 5 plays from Will Stein where you dissect it, you draw it up on the whiteboard. I encourage listeners to go read those if you haven't. It does require a subscription, so maybe I'm just kind of pushing listeners to come over and check out DuckTerritory. But John's done a great job every week. 5 plays that stood out. You've now had 25 plays you've diagrammed. Obviously, you've broken down many more, but just for the site, are there trends you're seeing? Are there things that Will's doing now, or maybe matchups he's trying to, or personnel package he's trying to exploit that? Do you just stand out and go, that's either a little different, or okay, this feels like really what he's leaning into. This feels like his bread and butter.
What makes Stein's offense so good is that it's so simple. It's a lot of pretty easy reads for the quarterback, a lot of simple concepts, sticks, spacing, these regular things to get those underneath passing game working. But it's the way he dresses it up in terms of shifts, motions. Penn State was doing that on just about every drive or every play in that last game, but Oregon does it too, and it gives Dante Moore something to look at out there, because you get a motion, a shift, anything, the defense is going to start moving and they're going to reveal something about what they're doing, and Dante Moore has been very good at picking up on those things early on. And then he also has personnel that allows him to do things like with Kenyon Sadiq, where he can put Kenyon Sadiq in the backfield out wide, in the slot. You can move them all over the board, and you don't really know what the Ducks are going to do from that and what they're kind of going to get after. But it can kind of be anything, because Sadiq is such a chess piece out there that you can run these simple concepts, but defense aren't still really expecting them, because, hey, we didn't know they were going to give the ball to the tight end on a jet sweep and then he was going to jump over somebody. So
it feels like to me that the composition just makes a lot of sense in terms of the player types, like the archetypes, if you will, of like, you brought up like Sadiq is such a unique player, but like even having someone like Malik Benson, who we know can run like 10 threes in the 100, and obviously Dorian can run something similar, maybe even faster. But Dorian's, I mean, he's so advanced in terms of like the backs. Now we're jumping into position groups we're not supposed to, John, so I apologize for that. But just broadly, I look at it and go, like, it feels like everything kind of fits into place for what he wants to do, and it feels like there's been like an intentionality for how they've built this roster. I know, like, we'll talk about Malik Benson, the receivers, later, but like I know when they added him, it was kind of like overlooked, but it makes sense now that you kind of see the way he's being utilized each week. Not that wasn't intentionality in the past, but this is Dan's baby now. Like, this is his roster. Will's been here for 3 years. I don't know. That's just an observation I've had. It feels like you're fully being able to see this was Will Stein and Dan Lanning's vision for this offense, and they're finding the personnel to be able to build out kind of exactly what they want to do.
Absolutely. I think Lanning came in and he was inheriting some of a roster from Cristobal when he came in, and then Stein was inheriting somewhat of an offensive installation and system. He had his quarterback already from Kenny Dillingham in Lanning's first year. But yeah, like you said, a lot of these guys who are key contributors on this team, even guys like Sadiq who are experienced from last year, that's a Lanning recruit though. That's a guy that he brought in and wanted to be his, like, one of his guys. And same, you look at them, I mean, we'll get into the defense at another point this week, but the like Amari Washington, these guys on either side of the ball that are Lanning's guys, and you're seeing them make an impact at this point.
Let's jump into the position stuff here. All right, we'll start with quarterback. Some of these position breakdowns, we're going to like dive through like usage. We're going to dive through like who's kind of snapping in what situations, like how are they fitting. Quarterback's going to be a little different. They've got one quarterback. He plays every down. He's really good. He's the Heisman Trophy favorite right now. I've got a couple of things, John, that really stand out to me about Dante. I'm guessing they're going to be similar, but like through 5 weeks, like run through 2 or 3 things that just have really stood out to you, maybe 2 or 3 traits that really impress you, 2 or 3 kind of moments, just kind of where's your head at when I ask you about Dante?
Yeah, we know about the arm talent. That was the thing that people talked about him when he was coming out of high school, coming out of Detroit, and then when he was a freshman at UCLA as a big recruit. People talked about, yeah, this kid does have a big arm, and it's shown up. We've seen some of the throws in the Oklahoma State game, but it's the other things, the intangibles, that have really stood out to me. As a this kid's 20 years old. He's younger than I am, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But like to have the poise he did in a situation in Penn State in that game on Saturday is just very impressive for a kid his age. And is it's not just he faced that situation, but even in specific plays, the touchdown to Gary Bryant in overtime, he gets denied Dennis Sutton right in his face, one of the better edge rushers in the entire country, and he doesn't panic or anything and is able to step around him and deliver that ball. And those are the things too, like, I didn't know he was going to be such a good off script this early. He was going to be, and not only like be able to create plays off script, but be safe with the ball off script and not jeopardize it and put the offense in bad situations with turnovers or anything like that. So he has been. I mean, as you said, he's the Heisman favorite for a reason, but he's been everything that Oregon fans could have asked for and much more early this season, because he was the big question mark, because people were like, yeah, this kid is talented. We know he's talented, but we haven't seen him in a year. He's been hiding out behind Dylan Gabriel, and you can see that with the work that was going on last year, it's been evident on the field this year, because he looks so comfortable in the system and with all these, even the checks and stuff at the line of scrimmage. He knows what he's doing out there for sure.
Yeah, I think just to the way I've been thinking about it is the first thing he had to do is kind of break down the UCLA reputation. And you kind of touched on it right at the beginning earlier, just about that play against Montana State where he had the opportunity to make a throw, which would have been really similar to a couple of the throws Dylan Gabriel threw for interceptions last year. He's kind of rolling right, could throw across his body into traffic, trying to make something happen. So the fact that he decides to run out of bounds, and really you look at the interception he did have, it doesn't seem like that was a bad read. That seems like he threw it into the wind downfield. I can't think of moments. Again, the reputation was this guy maybe is a little gunslinger, maybe puts the ball into danger. That's been so far. And it's a credit to Will. It's a credit to Dante for coaching him that way, for him receiving that teaching. But that's the first thing that stood out to me. It's just the reputation for him was he's going to maybe turn the ball over a little bit. Had 9 interceptions as a freshman and 5 starts. Had 3 in the game he got pulled against Oregon State. Those are kind of the metrics of, young quarterback who doesn't quite understand it. He's advanced a ton in that regard. And then I guess 2 other things that really stand out to me. First is you mentioned the off script stuff. It's that ability to climb the pocket and then be decisive. It's either throw the ball upfield, or what we've seen more recently, make plays with his feet. And again, the reputation at a high school is more about the arm talent. If you were just to make a broad claim, he was always more a Tom Brady, not a Michael Vick. However you want to frame it.
If you want to put those as the 2 extremes, but
right, I'm just picking the most extremes possible. Yeah. He was not a guy who you thought was going to win a ton with his legs. He was also probably a guy who was more likely to make the right decision in the pocket. As a high school kid, that was kind of what people thought. And the fact that he can climb the pocket, he's got 1 sack this year. He's been scrambling with effectiveness. He's been throwing on the run with effectiveness. That stands out. And then just the last thing, and it's kind of a small thing, his little sidearm release on those screen passes. I've just been so impressed with how much extra space. I know John, you may even have this charted or something about it, but the screen game maybe doesn't feel quite as pronounced this year than it has been past years, and maybe that's just me misremembering. But when he does, he gets that thing out so quickly. It feels like that gets the players a little bit of an extra advantage just on the quick release.
Yeah, I think I looked at it on PFF last week or something. The screen rate was slightly down from where Gabriel and Nix were at in the offense, but like you said, it immediately stood out to me in that Montana State game, because they weren't really pushing the ball with him downfield in that Montana State game that much, but there's a lot of the underneath stuff working quickly in the offense. But immediately, as soon as I saw him in person and we were there, it was, wow, those balls are getting out quick, because he doesn't have to set his feet or anything. He can just turn it and flick it. And even the touchdown to Gary Bryant, where he comes around deny Dennis Sutton, he gets steps around him and then kind of is a little sidearm action to kind of get that ball out to Bryant, get it around the extra lineman. So,
all right, last thing, favorite play for Dante so far. Do you have one?
It's hard to pick. The throw to Malik Benson in the Oklahoma State game, one of the most impressive throws I've seen, just in terms of the velocity, placement, accuracy, everything of it. I throw it from the 50-yard line on a line like that. But if I had to choose one specific play, okay, so the one to Dorian Moore from that game is also pretty impressive. Just because, and that was something too we talked about with him after the game, was he said that it wasn't a designed rollout on that play, that that's again an instance of him being a playmaker, where he saw the blitz coming, knew he had to get out of the pocket, and was able to set his feet and deliver a strike downfield. But some of those plays he was making in that Penn State game were just ridiculously impressive. The one to Dorian Moore in that game to set up Jordan Davison's touchdown in the 4th quarter, I think that might be one of my favorites of the entire season.
Yeah, the Kenyon Sadiq rollout too in that game, going right, threw it back across his body. The thing we said he hadn't been doing, right, and the fact that he took some risks there off platform. Yeah, those all stand up. The Benson one for me, I think is going to be hard to surpass, just because of the touch and texture on that one down the field. Let's jump over to running back. This is we could spend probably a full 40-minute podcast on this, John, because it's been just a wild ride. It felt like we knew what the hierarchy might be going into the season, and then we watched the first game and we were completely wrong. And then it felt like we knew what the hierarchy was the first couple games, and then Noah's unavailable, and it's completely shifted multiple times. It feels to me and maybe we'll just start this way. Like, who would be our preferred primary ball carrier? And I think, not to be a prisoner of the moment, but doesn't De'Aaron Hill Jr. sound pretty nice based upon his way he produced this last week and was by far the most productive, you could argue skill player, but certainly running back in that game.
I think if you were to choose one person to get the most touches, I think that person should be Hill, because he just brings a juice to this offense. You saw it in that Penn State game once they kind of started going to him a little bit more in that second half, where he broke off like a 20-yarder, but then it was a 9-yarder, an 11-yarder, and he was getting into that secondary. But I think this running back room works so well because you have these skill sets that complement each other. And so I don't think this is a situation where you say, hey, De'Aaron Hill's our guy, let's give it to him as much as we can. You want him out there in certain situations, but you don't want to, tip the defense off that, hey, this is who we're looking to get it to. You can disguise those things by also having Jaden Lamar out there, who can get the ball and can be explosive at times and is a really good blocker, and same with Jordan Davison. So I think that's what makes this running back group so good overall, is the fact that you have these diverse skill sets in there, and it allows you to get to a lot of different things. They had a ton of 21 personnel in that Penn State game, and especially in that second half with Davison and with Hill. Even as they didn't use Noah Whittington or Lamar as much, but they liked a lot of those two back sets and can get to creative looks out of those, because you can stick Hill out wide and throw him a screen pass because he's got the speed on the outside to be able to take that in for a touchdown.
Yeah, no, and let's stick with just like the broader use of backs. It feels to me, at least coming off the heels of this last game, that the rotation's kind of been condensed to 4, with Noah, with Jaden, and then 2 freshmen. Mm-hmm. That feels about right for me. You look at what Oregon's done with Dan since he's been here. It has been like a 2 to 3 kind of player rotation, and I think in 2022 they kind of used 4 because Sean Dollars was like the pass catching third down back, and then they had Jordan James as the power back. But the last couple of years in particular, it feels like it's been more like a 2 or a 3. I feel like this is a year where you can see all 4 of these guys being incorporated throughout the course of the season. And like, to get back to your point on 21 personnel, like it just seems like it works. It just seems like there's a huge success rate when they have either Jordan or Jaden as a lead blocker, or I guess, how much have they inverted that where maybe De'Aaron or Noah or somebody's been the lead blocker?
Not a ton, because they'll move Davison or Lamar like into different spots too. Specifically, like they've used Davison in almost some like wing back tight end type positions to just get him out in space. And they put him in the slot. I thought was interesting too in that Penn State game, a pretty decent amount.
Okay, well, that's going to be interesting too, is just seeing where do they move those guys around, how they use from a personnel perspective. But those 4 guys to me feel like they all have value in this offense, whether it is as a primary ball carrier or a ball catcher or even a primary blocker. I think just to go down the list there, like how many touchdowns is Jordan Davison going to score this year is just like a question I have. Like,
yeah,
this guy could be like breaking school touchdown records by like his 3rd season with the way it looks. Let me pull up the list to make sure that doesn't sound too outlandish, but I know I was looking at it before, kind of going like, it wasn't on my like bingo card that this true freshman was going to lead the team in touchdowns, and it certainly wasn't on my card that he might like finish as the school's all-time leading touchdown scorer based on the early pace he's on.
Well, exactly, because that first game we were watching it and being like, oh yeah, they're going to give the freshmen some touches. They're playing Montana State, and then all of a sudden he gets it. I think he score 3 touchdowns in that game or the Oklahoma State game. But he gets in
3 Montana State, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're like, oh, maybe he is a real option in the short yardage. And as the season has continued, he has been that go-to guy in short yardage. And then you've seen it too in times like they put him in there, they subbed him into the game for a 4th and 1. It was like they were around midfield. It was right before Sappington hit the field goal that tied it at 3-3. They faked the ball to Davison on 4th and 1. Everybody crashes on Penn State's defense because it's Jordan Davison. He's 240 pounds. If we don't crash hard to the line of scrimmage, he's just going to bowl through everybody. And then Dante's able to pull it, hit Dorian Moore downfield for a big conversion. So it can open things up with the offense too, because now teams are afraid of Davison and what he can do as that short yardage guy.
Just to give listeners kind of a sense of the school record list, single season 21 touchdowns, LaMichael James. That doesn't feel super attainable. 3 guys have had 15 for 8th on the list. Most recently, Jordan James in 2024 last season. That range could be plausible. I don't know if I expect him to score a touchdown every game, but so far that's been the case. And then if we want to look at the career list, maybe it's overstepping unless he's going to be like a true 4-year guy, because Royce Freeman had 60 in his career.
But
So
Royce Freeman got it started early too. He was another guy who was I think he scored 17 or 18 touchdowns as a freshman for Oregon. So
he sure did. Yeah, he scored 18 as a freshman, 17 as a sophomore, 16 as a junior, 16 as a senior, sorry, and then his junior year not on this top 10 list. But obviously, if we were to do the math real quick, we could probably crack what that code is, probably like 12 or
so that's the type of pace Davison would have to be on. But I mean, if that was 18 touchdowns in probably 13 games or so, Davison's got six now in 5 games. He's still on the above a touchdown per game pace. So
yeah, I think it's 7 actually.
Very impressive.
No kidding. Okay, so if we're gonna suggest Noah and Jaden aren't the lead back, what are their roles if we think it's going to be Dier? And I guess I also and I think what you said earlier was spot on of like, because I was also looking at Georgia's offense when Dan was there, and obviously Dan didn't coach those teams, but I'm sure that was in, yeah, he learned a lot at that time. That was like there were some things to take away, and like in 2022 and 2023, like those season or 2021 and 2022, those championship teams, one of which he was a part of, like they had 4 running backs with like over 350 yards and a couple guys in 800 range. So I think to suggest they're going to use 4 doesn't feel out of the realm possibility. I guess I'm just wondering from your perspective, like what are the strengths of those 2 guys, and what do you think like Will wants to lean into using Noah and Jaden in particular? Because we've already kind of established the Dier and Jordan roles.
Their strengths are similar in a way to those guys, and we've seen them get used in like where they put Whittington and Lamar out there in similar packages that they put Hill and Davison out there together because they like Lamar's blocking. It's been really good as a pass blocker throughout the year, really good as a run blocker as well. And then Whittington has that same explosive, like big play breaking style as Hill. We saw it in the Oklahoma State game when he takes the second play of the game for a 60-yard touchdown. So because of Whittington's health right now, and us not really knowing where that's at, and kind of hoping that gets better after the bye week, but his touches have slowed down since that, which I think has coincided with Hill getting more looks because Hill is a guy that can bring that same kind of juice to the offense. So I would expect more of it's just like those 2 sets of guys rotate with each other to kind of give similar like looks to the offense.
And I do want to say on Jaden, he's been like a very polarizing player in the fan base. It feels like for whatever reason. I thought he played really well at times in Noah's absence as the primary running back. I also thought last game was probably his worst game of the season. And I don't know if that was having kind of rewatched it and focused on a couple of the things. There were moments where he didn't get a whole lot of yardage, but I don't think there was a whole lot there. And there were also moments where it seemed like he might have not quite found the right crease. But he's somebody that it feels like, doesn't it feel like I don't know, maybe you're not having the same conversations or saying it quite as much, but it feels like he's somebody that fans like either are really impressed with or just like don't want him in the rotation at all.
Yeah, a lot of people are calling for his removal. I've seen it. I feel like the main thing that people have problems with is his vision as a ball carrier, and like you said, kind of hitting those creases in those lanes. I think that could improve, but a lot of really young running backs can improve on that. The things that he does have though are like physical strength and speed that are hard to replace, because he's built like a kind of that muscle hamster build where he's where he's just like a shorter, stockier guy, which is what makes him a very good blocker and stuff like that. But we've seen at times too that he can be explosive when he gets out in space. He took a 50-yard counter against Oklahoma State this year. Last year when he was the third string guy, he took a screen pass for 50 yards against Oregon State. So we know he can be explosive at times. It's just kind of finding that consistency as an every down runner, because that was a struggle in that Northwestern game where Jalen Lamar was that lead guy. He took his first carry for like 17 yards, and after that it was a bit of a lot of 1 to 2 yard gains where he couldn't really find much.
What do you think of, I guess, just Will's approach in the run game this year? Because I was just pulling this up and looking at it, and you can maybe better than me explain to listeners, but if the PFF breaks it down by run type, 85 so far from a zone, 69 from gap. And the reason I bring that up is that is a huge shift from his first year when they ran like almost 2/3 more from gap a zone. And then last year it was pretty much even. What do you think's gone behind that? And maybe explain to listeners and even to me to clarify a little bit of like what is that telling us about his decisions and the approach?
Yeah, Stein definitely does like his gap scheme runs. Those counter is his favorite call. It's what the Oregon busts their big play runs off of. It's a lot of counter stuff, and especially when you have guys like Emmanuel Pregnon, he specifically likes to run that behind. But I think it speaks to a little bit of what he's found along the offensive line in terms of the talent that they've been able to acquire. They just have better linemen, better athletes on that line, and you kind of have to run those zone blocking schemes. You have to have linemen who can move in space, and guys like what we've seen from Alex Harkey when he's out in space on some of those where he gets aggressive. But you have to have guys who can move in space to be able to reach those angles on defensive linemen and stuff like that in the run game and those zone blocking schemes. So I think it's a little bit more of those are easier to run. It's like I've heard it explained from like an offensive line perspective in like the Shanahan zone outside zone system that it's like a zero. He basically can turn you into a computer like as an offensive lineman. It's like a 0 or a 1. Like I block right, and if there's nobody there, I like I get to like the next level. But those plays are easier to run. So you've seen him, but you have to have like the talent to be able to do that. We've seen him as they've collected that talent. Guys like Isaiah World and Iapani Lalo Ulu Poncho at center has been so huge for this team this year. And in terms of just the continuity that he brings to the line, even though there isn't continuity because it's mostly a new group together, but it feels like there is continuity because he's the guy kind of in charge of everything. But yeah, those zone schemes, you got to have the athletes to do it, and it feels like he has those athletes, and they can do that a little more because it's the easier stuff to run. But yeah.
Last thing before we move on to receivers and tight ends, I wanted to get your thoughts on. We talked about the 4 guys we think are central. That also means 3 guys have seemingly been phased out, at least, and certainly based upon the last game where we didn't see Jay Harris, we didn't see Dewan Riggs, we didn't see Mekhi Hughes. I'm still don't have a great explanation on what happened with Mekhi, unless it's just as simple. And this is kind of where I'm at is he's just not as good as the 4 players we're talking about. But it is a huge surprise that somebody who had more than I think 1,200, 1,300 yards rushing back-to-back years playing in a respectable football conference. Not he came from the FCS or something. That he's just been completely, now doesn't have really any role at this point in these big moments. And, even go back to the games against lesser competition, he would get maybe a series in the first half here or there, but never really kind of any traction. And certainly looking at like the explosive run, like rate, pretty much non-existent. So what's your take on just like, not to pile on necessarily, but like when you watch them, like what's the difference between the 4 guys that they have used to maybe the 3 guys that we're not seeing incorporated this most recent game?
I think those guys do just a little more of what this offense is based around than maybe Hughes and Jay Harris do. I think Dewan Riggs is more of that like speedy, evasive back. He's just a bit of a younger guy, and more of a developmental piece. But I think like I would guess maybe he's not as like a guy like Mekhi Hughes isn't as strong in the blocking, and then they're not going to get him out on those 21 personnel looks where they want a more physical back because he matches up physically a lot more similarly to Lamar than to guys like Whittington and Hill. So it's just been confusing to see him kind of disappear like that because coming into the year, I thought running back would be one of the strongest positions on this team, and that was largely based on the fact that I thought Mekhi Hughes would be a guy that they relied a lot on as like a veteran, as a team with a young quarterback in Dante Moore. I thought it was going to be a lot of Mekhi Hughes in the red zone. I thought he was going to be a guy that was 15, 16 touchdowns or so. So.
Yeah, the fact that he is 5th among running backs in carries to this point in the season, and then I think 6th in yardage, I didn't expect that. And then the fact that he's completely absent. So Dan will speak with media on Wednesday, and we'll kind of see an explanation.
And in those early games too, he was getting he'd get like a first half series, and then like wouldn't play again until garbage time basically, and then it would be like him and Riggs at the end.
Yeah. A little confused by it, but I think at the end of the day, no one should be complaining because what we're seeing from this running back room is a very high-end product that has been, I'd say, outside of moments against Northwestern, just like consistently really, really good and probably one of the better running back rooms we've seen. And like, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in the future, but there's so much young talent on this team. And the fact that they're relying on 2 true freshmen and they're both coming up with, one of the guys is one of the national leaders in rushing touchdowns, and the other one is one of the national leaders in yards per carry average. Like these guys have proven they belong, and that's a really exciting proposition. All right, we're going to take a real quick break here, and then we'll come back and talk wide receivers, tight ends, and offensive line. All right, welcome back to the Otts and Audibles podcast. We've had a couple position groups. We've talked about some Will Stein play calls. Let's move to the pass catchers, and we'll start with a little bit at receiver here, John. This was a position group that I didn't really know what to expect. Like, it's funny looking back at it. I kind of thought I had running back sort of ish pegged, and then I was completely wrong. And receiver, I kind of didn't know what to make of it. And now through 5 games, I think we have a really good idea of everybody and how they fit in their roles. And that's with the possibility of Evan Stewart returning looming. But this last game, there were 3 guys that played like 85% or more of the snaps on offense. And it was Dorian Moore, it was Malik Benson, it was Gary Bryant Jr. It feels like those are the 3 guys. And frankly, like I've talked about earlier, it feels like they're really like a nice complement to all of each other's skill sets. The composition makes sense. Just broadly with those 3 guys, you can go in a bunch of different directions. What kind of stands out to you about how they maybe complement each other?
Yeah, they kind of they scored down their receiver rotation, and part of that was unfortunately some injury things like Stewart, like Tyler Casper, Justice Lowe, the amount of guys who have dealt with things at various times in that room. But
Dylan Gresham being a guy we haven't seen.
Exactly. But it does feel like they really have found their 11 personnel look, and then Jeremiah McClellan can be that extra guy at times, kind of that number 4 receiver to substitute in and out of the offense. But I was on Quacksmack last night, and Saul Galvan from KWV asked me like what stands out to me from the skill group of these guys who have been there for Dante Moore, and the name that stood out to me was Gary Bryant Jr. because I feel like he was a guy that a lot of people just forgot about really because he wasn't, he was hurt for most of last season, but a couple of years ago he was a key part of this offense with Bo Nix, was like the number 4 receiver there, and you've seen the trust that has been there early this season with Gary Bryant out there because he's out there as the number 2 receiver basically the entire time when they go to these 2 receiver sets. It's him and Dorian Moore. But they really like him in the slot. They trust him to do the blocking stuff you do have to do as a slot receiver. And then he's got a good connection with Dante, and you saw it in that last game where he was just running these spacing routes, stick concepts, just short stuff, and Dante was able to hit him for like conversions where it's just timing routes, and those are ones that they were working on all off season and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was notable to me that 5 of his 6 receptions came in the 4th quarter overtime.
Yeah.
And I think 4 of them came for first downs and 1 came for a touchdown,
Yeah,
or maybe
exactly.
3. Maybe it was 3 were first down and 1 for a touchdown. But like, he was money. He was such an integral part of that win. And I hope that doesn't get overlooked because I mentioned Jaden Lamar being a polarizing guy. You kind of touched on it. Gary Bryant's another one of those guys that the fan base, I feel like, doesn't quite know what to do with because he's been in the program a while. He's never been like a quote unquote superstar, but you need role players. And that's kind of what he feels like to me. He's very reliable. He's like your 4th, he's like a starter on your basketball team who doesn't score a lot of points, but he plays great defense and he sets a lot of guys up around him. That's kind of the broad pitch I would make. And he has had some explosive plays running downfield. The screenplay against Oklahoma State, I think it was the long catch against Oregon State. He's had some explosives. He's had touchdowns in 4 or 5 games, including what ended up being the game winner. But he's become a very important part of this offense and the veteran of this group, right? I know Malik Benson is also a senior and he's been in college football for a long time, but this is year 3 for Gary. This is year 1 for Malik. This is year 1 for Dorian. This is year 2 for Jeremiah. Like, we talk about the guys that are involved here. Like, Gary's the one who's been around the longest. I think that experience is pretty invaluable for this group.
Yeah, he's been around as long as Stein has. So there's clearly like a trust with him in that system for sure.
What can we say about Dorian Moore? Like, we could probably do 10 minutes. Like every game, to me, it feels like, I kind of mentioned it with Dante. It's like every game we're kind of learning a little bit more about him. I feel the same way about Dorian, whether it's the blocking game 1, the explosiveness against Oklahoma State, all those back shoulder catches against Oregon State, and then a couple of the catches he made this last game in huge spots, just like the wrist strength and hand strength to possess that. The one down the sideline to set up the touchdown that you mentioned earlier, like that's like not what 18-year-olds are supposed to be able to do when being defended by.
And for that to be not only like a big moment and stuff, but a scramble situation where he knows to, hey, get upfield and find a spot for your quarterback to be able to find you and get your head back to him. That's just like an intangible play that for a kid to make that at 18 is really impressive.
So I kind of ball hogged again. I'll throw it back your way. What are some things that really popped for you with Dorian?
It's hard to like not get too excited about him with the way he's played so far. I mean, like the way. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. He reminds me a lot of Jamar Chase from what I see, just in terms of his body control on some of those jump balls and the back shoulder stuff, and then also how good he is after the catch and the strength that he plays with, because he's in that similar build where he's like 6 foot, like 200 kind of ish. But he plays a lot stronger than you'd expect for a receiver, and it shows up on the blocking, but it also shows up when he's people are trying to tackle him, and he can, just push off that extra guy to dive towards the pylon on a jet sweep in that Oklahoma State game. And the way he moves out there it's not quite Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson, I always thought he just moved different for this team. The last couple of years, he just kind of glides out there. But Dorian has a similar kind of way where he can accelerate and not, or change directions and continue to accelerate and not really lose speed, which defenders aren't ready for most of the time.
Two things, because you made the comparison to Jamar Chase, which I love and I've heard and totally co-sign on. That made me think of that. I saw a post on our board compare D'Eriq Hill to Jamal Charles a couple days ago, and I'm fixated on that. I think that's a really good one. I just wanted to throw that out. I know we're jumping back to a position group. But to steer the conversation back to where we were just at, what's Dorian's biggest weakness? Like, I've been thinking about that. Like, he's so polished, he's so versatile, he does everything so well. And if you don't have an answer, that's fine, because I don't know if I do.
No, I don't know if I do either, because I don't know if we've seen it yet. We haven't seen, they haven't asked much of him yet, which I think has been good for him. Like, we saw it early. He was getting a couple touches a game, get some design stuff, and he was doing a lot with those touches and impressing, but they weren't asking him to do a ton where you're going to expose some of those weaknesses. So I think that's been good for him so far, to kind of ease him into things. But I was really impressed by just how much they asked of him in that Penn State game, because I don't know if he led the team in targets in that game, but I think he led the team in receptions, and they were just constantly finding him with the ball. I mean, it'd be hard to get into a weakness without I can't criticize his route running because I can't see it on the game. Like, I can't see everything on the broadcast, the broadcast angle. So it's hard to find anything at this point that he hasn't done well.
He blocks well. He wins in the screen game. He wins intermediate. He wins deep. He's great after the catch. Hands are awesome. He's advanced in terms of the back shoulder stuff. They use him he's great in the jet sweep, like the run game when they utilize him there. It's just, it's check all the way down.
And he's trusted like a true X, a true number one in this offense. He's out there lined up by himself a lot of the time. They're not, moving. They do move him around because that's what you should do as a good play caller. You move your guys around to get them the ball in creative ways, but they trust him out there like he is a veteran, like he is that guy that you can line up outside and he's going to threaten defense on every play.
All right, and the last one we'll just hit here is Benson, who I know we've talked about on this podcast before, and probably not much that's been said on this show has changed, because this last game was his least productive game, the least involved. He still snapped, I think, got 53 snaps in the game, but only targeted a couple times, caught both of them for 11 yards. To me, it's just been the fit in this offense as that Z receiver. Like, we didn't necessarily know how that was going to fit this year, like who was going to be there. That felt like, frankly, where Evan Stewart was probably going to be again. And that's not been the case. And I just think the fact that there hasn't felt like a massive drop off, I don't think he's a better player than Evan Stewart. And I don't think John would agree with that either. At the same time, like his development and his inclusion in this offense has been so crucial as that deep threat and running those deep routes. Leads the team in ADOT by a decent margin. He's running those routes downfield, those deep posts and stuff. And Dante and him seem to have a good connection on those throws downfield.
Benson just has legitimate top tier speed, and we know about the track numbers and stuff like that, but it shows up when you're watching it too. He just gets off he explodes off the line of scrimmage, and his first step is really quick. But like you said, he has been a really good job at solidifying that Z receiver position and opening things up, because he can take the top off of the defense at any point with that speed. And then also showing off some of those other skill sets that he does have. That catch against Oregon State was ridiculous on the sideline. I mean, it was a ridiculous throw by Dante Moore in the first place, but to jump, spin, get the foot down, and all at the same time. That's something that, you're thinking, oh, this guy's a deep threat receiver. That's more of a play you expect from a guy like Dorian Moore, but for Malik Benson to be making that play. And you keep saying it. I'd like to see a little bit more of what Oregon can do with him in the screen game.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
Just because he is so fast, and his JUCO tape was a ton of catching. It was basically all go routes and screen passes. But because when he gets the ball in his hands, he can take off. So I'd like to see him. It feels like the screen looks he's gotten haven't been. It's been a lot of like short side of the field. They just flick it out to him. He picks up 4 or 5 yards. But if they can get him on like a creative something like what Gary Bryant had when they had the whole offensive line out in front of him, I think Malik Benson could surprise some people and take something 70 yards, like Gary Bryant's screen pass against Arizona State a couple of years ago.
I'm happy you brought up the screen game because I was going to hit that before I moved to tight end, because go watch his junior college film. It's as impressive as any you're going to find, I think. And you kind of mentioned it, like it's the guy who's in basketball. Maybe I keep making basketball comparisons, but whose shot chart is all dunks and threes. Like it's either short or just like all the way downfield. And that's kind of what you want from that position, I think, to a certain degree. There's that explosiveness. And the comparison coming in was Jamison Williams, who has a ton of juice, and Malik Benson also a ton of juice. So a lot to be excited from in that regard, I think.
Yeah, it looks like it was like the one good kid on the Pop Warner team type usage, where they're just trying to give it to him and let him do things. Just throw it, run as far as you can downfield. We're going to throw it to you, or we're just going to give you it right here and let you run off. So
let's move over to tight end. Kenyon Sadiq will be probably almost the only person we talk about. I want to give Jamari Johnson some flowers. He's been, I think, a very good blocker at times this year. Yeah. Also, when he has had the rare one catch per game, like he's made the most out of it. I think we're seeing the maturation of Kenyon Sadiq. Not that it's a surprise at all. I came into the year thinking he might be tight end 1 in the country in terms of a draft perspective, and first team All-American. I feel like he's absolutely lived up to that in every facet. PFF needs to adjust his blocking grades because that's an abomination. And John and I have talked about this every week, because you look up and you're like, I just watched this guy pancake 4 guys and drive block guys 20 yards downfield, and he's got like a 56.
Yeah, Sadiq has been he's been the talk of like the football draft nerd Twitter people that I follow, especially in the first couple of weeks when I asked one of the defensive backs last week, it's not often that you see a guy that you're a tight end that you're going against in practice. It's not often that you see that guy, you'd think you'd see a Sadiq highlight reels and it's him jumping over people and making these athletic plays. But it's a lot of the Sadiq highlight reels I see is just him pancaking dudes in the run game, because he just plays with, he's really good technique as a blocker. He gets a really wide base. He has good hands. And then he's so strong that he can just displace people really well. You said we don't need to talk a ton about Johnson, but I've been really impressed by Jamari Johnson. I think he could really, like, where Kenyon Sadiq was at a year ago in this offense. I think Jamari Johnson could kind of develop similarly. He's a different type of tight end, a bigger guy, more on the line instead of like a move piece. But he's been good when he's gotten the ball in his hands, and with his size, he is a really good blocker, because he's like 6'5", 6'6", almost 260. That's just a big guy. When you have the two of them out there, you can do all sorts of these different looks with the 12 personnel and the 13 that they like to get in, even with Roger Saliapaga. Yeah,
I'm happy they incorporated him, obviously, and it worked out in a huge spot for the touchdown. But
yeah,
they picked their spots with him, and I'm not saying it's identical, but it does remind me a little of like DJ Johnson several years ago when he was playing offense, where you get a guy that size who in the open field, I think you're just surprised he moves the way he does. And I'd have to pull it up, but I don't think he's really been targeted on any routes. I'm going to do that right now. Like any real routes downfield this year. It feels like everything's kind of been in the screen game, or at least in the intermediate.
Yeah, he's caught in a couple just like quick design things, but like you said, he does move a lot better than you'd think for someone his size, and so it does catch teams off guard at times, because he can beat people's angles, and then it's hard to tackle him when he has that size.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up here. His ADOT is 1.8 yards. So
yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds about right. So yeah, and shoot, let's see if they open it up and they try something down the field to him, because like I said, he can run. And I remember Kenyon Sadiq at Big Ten Media Day saying he's a better route runner than I expected him to be. And to this point, we haven't really seen him be asked to do too much, but I'd maybe lean into that. Maybe that could be a weapon here in one of these bigger matchups coming forward.
And I'd be interested to see if they go to him as like a red zone type of guy. I think he could be because if Sadiq is saying he's a good route runner, if he could win some routes down into the goal line where you don't even necessarily have to get wide open, but you create an angle and you get open enough where he's so big that it's going to be hard to defend those passes. Where they throw the fades to Kyler Casper. I'm not saying necessarily fade balls, but just things where he can use that size and that physicality to just kind of out be bigger than these safeties who are 6 feet tall, in the end zone.
Last two players in this group, one is probably miscast and another plea for the University of Oregon. Zach Grace is a fullback. List him as such, please.
Yes.
That's where he plays. And then Roger Saliapaga, the redshirt freshman. Actually, I think he's a sophomore because he did play over the number last year. Have also gotten some run, very much decreased roles last week. I don't think that's a surprise. And really, Zach Grace is just goal line short yardage anyway. So I don't know if that the snap count really changed a lot there. I like seeing Oregon lined up in that jumbo package using a fullback. I'm also waiting for when they give him the ball in some capacity. I never incorporate him.
Yeah, I would love to see it's like Zach Grace get when they do a lot of stuff where they'll motion him, they start him out as a tight end and then motion him into the backfield. I'd love to see him motion in and then get a fullback dive one of these times because I don't think anyone would quite be ready for it.
And 44, it would make me think of the Niners and Kyle Juszczyk, I think, a little bit. I'd be. I know you're a Seahawks fan. You've seen Kyle Juszczyk plays you weren't excited about, but it'd be fun to see a little bit of 44 with touching a football and getting in the end zone, maybe.
Yeah, I think last year we all thought he was Tatum Tuioti when we saw him out there in the first game. So
I think the announcers did too. I think that's why people were confused because he was miscast in that regard. Okay, last thing. Let's jump over to the offensive line, John. I was really impressed with their work on Saturday. Throughout the year, we knew this group would be effective pass blocking. That's been a staple under Erik Terry. Gosh, I wish I had pulled it up. He's probably allowed 25 sacks, I should say, in 2.5 seasons at Oregon, and that might even be too high.
I think Bo got sacked twice in each of his, or he got sacked 10 total times. I think it was 5 in each season, and then Gabriel was a couple more last year, but.
It's just, so maybe it's less than 20 at this point. I can pull that up here in a second after I'm done talking. But it's the run game, and that was an area we expected that there needed to be improvement. Totally different personnel with the exception of Poncho, who had been, I think, a pretty good run blocker to begin with. But Pregnon and Harkey in particular on rundowns have really popped, and you touched on a little of that earlier. Harkey is just really mean, and I can't stop watching that SWAT.
the swing, on the tunnel screen to Dorian Hill.
Yes.
Yeah, they like to get those guys in space too, especially guys like Harkey, because a defensive back doesn't want to encounter Alex Harkey in space, and we've seen it at times on the touchdown to Dorian Hill there, but on Dorian Hill's touchdown in the Oklahoma State game, they ran a reverse for him, and it was Sadiq, Poncho, and Harkey all out in front. Each of them got a defensive back, and each of them put that guy in the ground. So unfortunate situation to be an Oklahoma State defensive back with Alex Harkey running at you, but he's been really good. He's just so aggressive and so physical. That does cost him at times in pass protection, where he can get a little leany, or instead of trying to punching with his hands but keeping his base solid, it's more of a lean towards the guy, and then you can kind of club and rip around him or something like that. He's allowed the most pressures out of anybody on this offensive line so far. And same Isaiah World, his base at times, it makes sense for it to be the issue for a guy who is his size at 6'8". But Isaiah World, not many people can mirror defensive ends off the edge, those edge rushers, the way he does with his kick step, because his step is his not only is he fast with it, but his strides are so long that he can mirror really well. But yeah, this offensive line, it's hard to, the Ducks have had such good offensive lines, so it's hard to say, which one is the best out of these recent years. But, I think you could be looking at a group that's going to put, World has a chance to be a day 1 pick at offensive tackle just with those skill sets. But I think Pregnon will be a day 2 pick at guard. I think Poncho will be a day 2 pick at center, and I think Harkey could be a day two pick. I could see him getting moved to guard with his arm length, but he just got maulers for the most part. And Pregnon has been my favorite guy to watch this year. The Pregnon Poncho combo blocks are my favorite thing to watch on this team right now.
All positions, just it's like your favorite part of the team.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Dorian Moore is pretty fun to watch as well, but that's like when I posted like a compilation of Poncho on this combo block because he's so good at like Penn State, their center was not great on Saturday. I was not impressed by, and especially their guards. They had the one play they ran, like they ripped off like a 20-yard run with Katron Allen on the drive that set up the first touchdown from Aller, the big shot play, and that was the best play they blocked all day. It was like they finally hit two good double teams. It's something you see consistently on Oregon's tape is how good Poncho is on these double teams because that's what centers have to do a lot. You're in the middle, you chip on one guy, and then you climb to the next level. But he's so good at putting his like base and knowing how to create that angle and maneuver himself to chip the other guy and help his other lineman create a better angle. So then when he peels off and goes and knocks over a linebacker, then Pregnon can still stonewall that guy off to the outside. And Pregnon, I really like Pregnon. He has physical tools that are uncommon at guard in terms of his arm length and stuff like that.
I'm also really curious to see what he actually weighs, by the way. Because I think he's listed at like 315, but he looks.
I wouldn't be surprised
upper
if he's
half
like
is
330.
Yeah, his upper half is gargantuan. I just remember when he came out and did an interview a couple weeks back. That was basically all that was commented on the YouTube was his just the shoulders and biceps and just a big dude. Like
he's just got a big frame. That's why I'd be curious to know what the actual measurements on his arms are because I wouldn't be surprised if they're over like 34 inches because he seems like he has offensive tackle arms almost, and you see that times too where he gets these defensive tackles and he can get his hands into them and just hold them there because they literally can't reach his chest or anything to try to make a pass rush move because his arms are too long for these guys.
I did look it up. 27 total sacks in the Erik Terry era. I'd forgotten maybe because I just blocked out that Rose Bowl. Last year, 24 sacks allowed, which is,
I think it was 8 in that last game. So
it was kind of skewed the numbers because it was 5 in 2023 and then obviously 1 so far this year. What were your thoughts watching Isaiah World and Denai Dennis Sutton? I know it wasn't like they were matched up every snap together. They moved him around a little bit, Dennis Sutton, but there was a lot of one-on-one there, and Dennis Sutton didn't get home, but he also did get, I think, 6 or 7 pressures. What did you like? How did you think that back and forth? Because that's when you look at like these kind of prospects, those are guys who are both like looked at as day one possible picks, and those are kind of fun ones to zoom in. What was your takeaway watching that?
Yeah, I thought it was a fun matchup to watch because you could see that these guys, like you said, these guys are day one athletes, and you could see that Dennis Sutton is just powerful. World can kind of move differently than these other offensive tackles. But I think you could also see that Dennis Sutton is a bit more refined than Isaiah World at this point. When he gets into his chest, Isaiah World can get pushed back if he doesn't get his anchor low enough. He has a tendency to kind of get a little huggy instead of punchy with his hands. And you can see that at times. There was the play to Kenyon Sadiq, I thought was a clear as day holding on Isaiah World to me, or from my perspective, but no call there, and it works out for the Ducks. But to see him, I thought it was good to see him be able to recover at times too, though. World, where he did get beat initially by a guy like Sutton, where he can get into him with that power or around the edge, but then World can kind of recover it and be able to keep Dante out of trouble. So
I want to ask you about 2 more. I think we just have 2 more offensive linemen that play enough to address, and one's Dave Iuli, who I think is probably maybe the weak link, but that's because, and as you ran through a second ago, that's not because he's a bad player. It's because they might have 4 first, second, third, fourth round draft picks on this offensive line. I don't know if that's Dave's ceiling. He's also, I would say, likely to be back next year, which I don't know if we can say that. We can't say that about really many of these other guys. Poncho has eligibility. He's already come out and been like, if I have a good year, I'm gone. Harkey, I guess, with the JUCO lack of clarity, could get another year.
True.
I'm curious to see what his draft stock looks like. But what do you think about with Dave so far? What stands out with him?
Yeah, like you said, I do think he is the weak point on this offensive line. Not necessarily to a fault of his own. He is a solid, he's a solid guard. I think a lot of teams around college football would like to have a guy like Dave Iuli because of the strength he has. It's just more things like at times he gets knocked back more than these other guys at the line of scrimmage. There were some times when, like, I think it was the Northwestern game where it was a combo block between him and Poncho, and then both of them peel off. It seems like Iuli should be that guy holding that block, and then they both like leave a defender, and then he makes a tackle for 1 yard. Those are just mental mistakes that have got to be figured out. I think part of that has to do somewhat with when we saw him get moved from left to right in the first game of the season. Some of those things are just finding that chemistry with those guys and within that stuff. He just doesn't create as good of angles in the run game as these other guys do, I think, though. He's a solid pass blocker. You're not going to like drive him anywhere he's got a good anchor. You're not going to just push him back into Dante Moore's face, but his angles aren't as good in the run game, and he doesn't do as good at Pregnon does a really good job at when he'll reach a defensive tackle, get to his if they're trying to run the ball right, Pregnon will make that step, get to that defensive tackle's their far shoulder, and then be able to turn them around and get between himself and put himself between the ball carrier and the defender. And Iuli doesn't do those things as much. It's more of a push, but he doesn't get the hips around to kind of create that wall.
Last guy is just, and I know he plays so infrequently, so if we don't have a lot here, it's okay. But just in jumbo, they go Janoris Wilson, who's been wearing 35, and I just keep waiting for them to throw him the football again. I figured that's got to be built into the jersey change. And I guess I bring him up because and again, it's small sample size, and it's when he's out there, aside from mop-up duty, he's basically utilized in a role he wouldn't be utilized if he was a starter. He's the extra tackle, but I think he's notable because I expect both tackles are gone after this year, and assuming that they don't go heavy portal and just take two, this is maybe your starting right tackle next year.
Yeah, right now he does look like that guy who is in line to start next. But they do use him, and I think you can see that if he's the sixth lineman out there, I think that's for a reason. I think that's because he's probably the sixth best. I mean, you could say what you want about the interior guys. They're not going to put a guard out there as the sixth
Sure.
lineman or whatever. But yeah, I am excited to see whenever that pass does come to him, because last year we saw him he switched jersey numbers for the Michigan game, and then they didn't actually get to use the pass play, and then he pulled it out against Maryland, and we got to talk to him after that one, and he was very excited about it. So I'm looking forward to that one, because I when I first saw him out there at 35, I got confused because I was trying to watch it on the TV. I misidentified him as Douglas Utu, unfortunately, and
I believe Rob Mosley corrected you.
Yeah, I was going to say Mosley corrected me on that one, but I was like, I didn't know Janoris was in a new number again. So, but they do a lot of those extra tackle packages. They did a lot of that stuff, and you get in Davison's touchdown on Saturday. They go to a jumbo package, and then they put Janoris at right tackle and then moved Harkey from the right side to the other side. Because he's probably the stronger run blocker, and then ran that behind them, because now you have a full-sized offensive line on the right side, but you got three guys over there who are going to clear things to the left. So it just creates bigger bodies that you can move people with in those short yardage situations.
All right, John, we're creeping up on the hour mark here. I'm guessing we've exhausted most of our offensive material, but I'll just give you one final opportunity here. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you think is important to talk about? I know we basically covered all personnel, so maybe it's not something there, but is there just a thing that you think is worth talking about as we go into as we're kind of midway through this bye week?
I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens with Will Stein here. Not even necessarily this year, but the year and a half coming up. That guy's going to be a head coach at some point. It's going to be interesting to just see where he decides to take that opportunity. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, he's gonna have the opportunity to be selective. I'll say that.
Exactly.
There are jobs that have already opened. None of them, if I'm him, I'm taking. But there are going to be jobs that may open in December or later this year, or like you said, even following the 2026 season, that might be a little bit more interesting for him. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Odds and Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil, John Evans, breaking down the offense for an hour. This is a lot of fun, John. I think we're going to hop back on hopefully in the next couple of days, talk a little bit defense. Give some thoughts, run through it very similar to this, talk about what we've seen from Tosh, what we've seen from the position groups. But until then, thank you for listening to this episode of the Odds and Audibles podcast. Talk to you later, folks.